Hi everyone, I'm Katie Whitehouse. I'm music promotion. I run a music promotion, booking and management agency in Totnes in Devon called From the Whitehouse. Here it is, a little house where I keep wonderful things. I set up the company in 2013 with just one artist, and that was Reg Muros. And I now represent, I should say we now represent a fine group of singer-songwriters, musicians, and we get them gigs, we fill the gigs, we help each artist with strategic marketing and planning and promotion. And we only work with artists that we believe in as people, as well as musicians. And one of our mantras for life is making a difference and making the world a better place. And so we bring our knowledge and our passion to what we do every day in our work. Long ago, before there was a From the Whitehouse agency, my background was actually in marketing. I worked for a brand and corporate identity company in London and learnt probably pretty much everything there is to know about branding and communication and the importance of that. And it's something that's been really useful to me in every walk of life. And I've turned my hands to quite a few things. I've been a massage therapist, I've run an aromatherapy manufacturing company, and I've run songwriting courses, and now I do this. And marketing's been really useful knowledge for every single thing. It's something that we can bring to everything, as well as our passion for what we do. When I first started in marketing, though, in my 20s, I don't think I even really knew what my passion was. And the word marketing, I can remember it was quite a long time before I even worked out what it was. And I was almost a bit fearful of asking what it might be. And I was very pleased when I finally plucked up the courage to one of my peers and said, "How would you define marketing? It feels like we're practicing some kind of dark art which is secret. We've got lots of secrets. What are we actually doing here?" And they said to me, "It's really simple, Katie. We're getting the right product to the right place at the right price at the right time." And suddenly everything became a bit clearer. And since then, I've realized that marketing is all about common sense, or it should be. A lot of people may overcomplicate it, but those things I've just said are called the 4 Ps, and I'm not going to go into them now. That's a whole other subject, but I'll touch on those things that are really important and actually really simple. One of my favorite things in life and work is to make complex things simple, and that's a big part of communication. The kind of communication that is really useful for anyone, but in particular in the music industry, as I've learned. So we're specifically now going to look at making the most of your marketing budget. And when Folk Expo handed me that title, or suggested that title to me, I really liked it. It has got a ring to it. Making the most of your marketing budget. It reminded me of another workshop that I went to that I'm going to mention. But first, I just want to say that if you're sitting there thinking, what marketing budget, we will also touch on that, not just on how to spend the money that you may have available, but where do you get that money from? Sorry, I'm not handing it out, but got some suggestions anyway. So the workshop that attracted me from its title many years ago, when my kids were young, was how to feed your family for a £5. It's kind of got the same ring to it. It's snappy. It sounds like it's solving a problem. I signed up immediately to that, and I expected by the end of the workshop that I would have a list of delicious ingredients that were really cheap and amazing recipes, and basically my whole life would be sorted. But I was really wrong, because what we were actually learning about were things that were about finding your inner resource resourcefulness, like foraging and finding food in the wild that was free and available. Finding the courage to go to a food shop at the very end of the day and ask them if they were selling stuff off cheap. We were really being encouraged to think out of the box and not to be wasteful and tap into a different way of thinking, so that what we ended up with was not so much a to-do list, but more a to-be list, which of course long term is much more valuable. And the reason I mention that is like that workshop. This workshop is not going to be a one-size-fits-all tick list of where and how to spend your precious money on marketing your music. You'll know this already, but one size never fits all. Never fits all. You are all unique artists and people in a very busy industry, and you need to be able to be resourceful and creative in the way that I've just said about the other workshop. Find ways of how and where and when you can stand out clearly before you even think about spending any money on doing that. To draw people to your music. I can tell a little story. So I mentioned that Reg Muros was the first artist when I set up From the Whitehouse as an agency. I met him when I was running songwriting retreats, which I still do. And he was a facilitator that I invited in to run part of a retreat. Hadn't met him before. And I was completely blown away by what he did. Everything went really well. The whole retreat went really well. And then he left, and I didn't necessarily expect to hear from him again till I ran another retreat that he might be invited to facilitate at. But I think it was only a couple of weeks later, he got in touch and said, "Katie, I wonder if you can help me. That retreat that you ran seemed to go really well, and I remembered that it was fully booked, and I liked the way that you promoted it, and I wondered if you can help me because I'm running a retreat in Cornwall and it's just not filling, it's just not selling, and could you have a look at it for me? Do you think that you could help?" And that is exactly the kind of thing that gets me, I think, oh, I see a problem. I immediately want to find a solution to it. And so I was intrigued. I said, yeah, okay, go on, show me what you've been doing, or show me what they've been doing, and I'll just see if I've got any suggestions. So I looked at the poster, the PDFs and the promotion that had gone out, and the words actually said perfectly good communication things about, what the date, the time, all that kind of thing. But I wasn't really surprised that it hadn't sold. I phoned up and I said to him, "Reg, I'm really not surprised this isn't selling, because it looks as if you might be running some kind of craft weekend or leatherwork weekend, or even something to do with horses," because the person who designed the poster it was in somewhere in Cornwall, and something to do with the place that it was had led to them including a whole load of line drawings about horses and close-ups of saddles, and there was a picture of Reg, but it wasn't really clear that you were going to be going and having the opportunity to write songs. And so it was kind of easy to remedy that poster. I asked him to send me some photos, I asked him to send me some quotes from stuff, and we just whipped up something that communicated better. It wasn't difficult for me to do that. Anyone could have done that, and I suspect the person who designed that poster could equally have done that. But I think the thing is that marketing is common sense, and sometimes we get a bit too close to something to see what someone else might be seeing. And so, that's true with a poster, that's true with absolutely anything. So the reason I tell that story is that it demonstrates perfectly to me how unwisely we might spend our precious marketing budget when you're promoting an event. A poster, whether it's digital or physical, is something that you're going to be using, posters and banners. And if you're spending money on getting them designed and printed, and you come out with something that looks like it's something completely different, then that's money ill spent. And I don't think that poster will have sold any or many places on the songwriting retreat. It might have sold a few saddles, I don't know, but anyway, my point is, get our communication right before we spend a single penny, so that we don't waste any of that precious money, because it's hard to come by. So getting what I call all our ducks in a row before we even make a poster is something that I will be talking about. Questions to ask yourself. What are the ducks? Let's say if I say get your ducks in a row, what would they be for a poster? It's kind of simple for a poster, isn't it? What am I saying? What's my message? Who's part of this? Where's it going to be? When's it going to be? What's the price? Why should people come? I think why should people come? And communicating something about you is really important. That, that was kind of, I thought that was going to be a one-off, but really, ideally, our marketing is never a one-off. It can be tempting probably when we think, oh, this thing coming up, let's just whip together a poster for it. My point today is that we should be thinking deeper and longer term about everything we do before we start to communicate, because then our communication will be loads more effective. We need to, if you want people to know who you are, and instantly from your photo or the way that you present yourself, think, oh yeah, that's who that is, they'll begin to develop some trust and confidence in you. The more consistent you are, if you keep changing your visual and doing crazy things, that could be part of your brand, that would be fine. But if it's not, then be consistent and build bricks. The bricks that you build need to be consistent, and they build a kind of family of visual language that people will recognize. The type of things that you might consider for a poster are: make sure your photos are great. Consider, have you got a logo? Is that something worth? Have you as an artist or as a band got a logo? Is that something that could work well for you for that instant recognition? What typeface are you using? Are you always using completely different typefaces, or can you always use the same thing and become more recognizable? Something that makes it you and your band. Maybe the color ways are going to be consistent, or at least consistent across one tour and album release, and then people will begin to become familiar, and you'll get more traction with the things that you're putting out. And as I said, the questions we should be looking at before we can begin to design a poster really are the bigger ones, and getting clear on the big stuff is good, because the small stuff then just follows and everything becomes more enjoyable. Anyway, back to a bit more of the story. That retreat filled and was really successful, and maybe just a few weeks later, Reg asked me if I would be interested in being his booking agent. And I actually had absolutely no idea what that was. But he explained to me, it's just getting gigs and festivals. And I thought, I can remember sitting and thinking, getting gigs for a genius, how hard can that be? Turns out pretty damn hard. And I was really grateful, because I took on the role, and I was really grateful for my experience and learning in marketing. It gave me an amazing starting point that we could all do, that we should, I think, in my opinion, all do and focus on. So it was great, really, because while I was focusing on how blimmin' far ahead you had to book to try and get a gig or a festival, and realizing how far ahead you needed to plan for an album release. I spent a lot of my time building a brand, building Reg Muros, not out of Lego, although that could be an interesting merch idea. I didn't know then about the music industry. I didn't know anything at all. I was very green and naive, which maybe worked to my advantage in some ways, because I might have given up if I had known how much hard work was ahead. But I was really passionate about the task. I really wanted to make it work, and I was really tenacious, and I could see there was a mismatch. It seemed to me that someone of Reg's caliber should be being snapped up by gigs and festivals, and I realized one of the problems was that a lot of people just he wasn't visible enough in a really clear way. He had a really strong fan base, but it wasn't as big as it should have been. So that was one of my main goals, was to build Reg Muros brand, and so that more people would understand what it was and see the appeal to them, and then become fans themselves. Anyway, I sat down with him in a cafe in Bridport in Dorset, and I said, we need to have a meeting so that I can get started on this. And I got out a massive, massive piece of paper. I think it was actually like one of those plain wallpaper pages, and a pen. And he said, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And I said, and I wrote in the middle of it, Reg. I think I might have wrote Reg folk musician or something like that, but the biggest word was Reg. I said, I need to get to know you. I need to understand who you are and what makes you tick, so that we can communicate that to the world and do it really well. And then so that when we're promoting something, we do it in a way that is really authentic and consistent and brilliant, and as in line with what you do as a musician. And so you might have seen my post on social media earlier. If you've got a pen and paper, maybe grab it now, and I will encourage you to do some things at certain points as I keep talking. This is what I did with Reg, putting his name in the middle, is something that I do it from time to time, you know, as for myself as a person, or myself as my work, reminding myself, what are my values? Who am I? I needed to work out who Reg was and what he was all about, so that he could stand out and communicate in this crowded market. It's really key, and as an artist, I encourage you to think really clearly about who you are, what you represent, what makes you different. I get many emails from wonderful musicians asking if I might be interested in being their agent, and the first thing I ask them is, why should I take you on? What makes you stand out? There are lots of other questions, but that is something that I'm always really interested to see what they say. Someone replied to me the other day saying, well, I'm a Scottish musician with a sense of humor, and I thought, is that what makes you different? That was really interesting. I think he did have a sense of humor. It was quite funny. But very often, I feel that it's the first time anyone has asked them that question, or that they've thought that question. And it makes sense, because of course you're focusing on your music, you're focusing on the brilliant stuff that you do, being the best that you can, and that feels enough. That feels enough from where you are. And from the outside, people are really busy. They want to be able to absorb you in one hit. They want to, even me, you know, guilty as an agent, I want to be able to look at that a shortish email, I want to be able to click on a couple of links, I want to see a photo, and I want that person to tell me what makes them tick, what makes them different, what makes them stand out. Because I would hope that when I click on that music link, that the music will speak to itself, for itself. But I know from my experience, this is the reason that I work with people who I'm passionate about as human beings, as well as musicians, because I need that engagement to build a really good relationship with an artist. And I think that fans need that. Often, that's not always the case. I made a sweeping statement, but I think that you get, if people can understand what makes you tick a bit, what if you can communicate that through your marketing, then you're doing your music, your brilliant music, a massive favor, because people will judge and move on quickly. And the first impression people get are really, really key. So yeah, this huge piece of paper, and Reg thought I was blooming mad, but have a go at it yourself. Maybe start having a think while I'm talking. Write your name or your band name in the middle of the biggest piece of paper you can find, or a tiny one if you haven't got a big one now, but it's something you can come back to again and again and again. And give yourself a moment to just be relaxed, to let your mind go a bit clear, to not be in a panic about this, but just be really curious. If I let my mind go blank, who am I? What do I represent as a human and as a musician? What inspires me? Why do I do this? Why am I doing it? What do I want people to think when they see my name? What do I want my name or my band name to mean to people? Think of all those things they might be. It doesn't matter if they're crazy. No one else is going to needs to see this piece of paper. You haven't got me standing over you like Reg did. In fact, I did the writing, so I was in total control. But what I did with Reg is I completely got to the bottom of what inspires him, who he is, how he sees the world, what drives him to write songs that he hopes will make social change. Totally something that I could relate to in terms of communicating then that to the world. And if you know his songs will speak. They will speak for themselves, but you've got to get somebody past that. I'm promoting a gig this weekend where I live in Totnes in Devon, and maybe the two artists that I'm promoting, the gig, Chris Cleverly and Dan Whitehouse, maybe people in Totnes haven't listened to masses of their music, so it's up to me to get a feeling across with every bit of promotion that I do, to encourage people to think that sounds good, even though I haven't heard it yet, and click on the link to listen to the music. Because if you can't get people beyond that first stage, then you've wasted money on your posters or on your Facebook ad. So yeah, hopefully you might have been jotting down a few things for yourself. The page grew into a massive spidery thing that I still look at every now and then, but and weep, no, and celebrate where we've come, because Reg went from a fairly empty diary in 2014 to winning an award for busiest troubadour of the year in 2016, and that was of course it's because of his music, but it's the why he hadn't got to that point before was because artists are busy, quite rightly, doing music, and somebody needs to get the word out, somebody needs to communicate, somebody needs to think we need to spend some money on this, or we need to not spend some money on this, but how can we do it if we haven't got money? And anyway, that is, I won't tell you too many more tales of Reg, but I feel it was a success story, and that's what opened a whole new world of working with other brilliant artists as well. I did promise that we would look at where does a marketing budget come from? Maybe it's possible, and I wouldn't blame you at all if you hadn't even thought of having a marketing budget, or allocating a marketing budget. I'm sure you've all had to find money for stuff. Every artist has to do that, but how would it be if you actually planned ahead for that, and where might it come from? I mean, the great news is, isn't it, that there's so much that we can do for free, and especially with mailing lists and social media. But you will have to spend money at some point, unless you're incredibly well connected, in which case come and work with me because I need you. But there's something else, well, there's two other things I wanted to say about actually allocating money. There's something about budgeting for and paying for things, planning to pay for things that are to do with your music and your career, that can actually change your own perspective of yourself, your own perception of yourself. I think that when you do that as an artist, you are actually saying, I value myself, I'm going to put this money aside, I'm going to value myself enough. When you begin to do that, everything shifts. And I don't mean just about money, but when we're able to value ourselves, everything else will shift. But also that there are other currencies that are valuable apart from money, and one of them, a massive one in this industry, is building relationships. So think of that as part of a currency that's really useful as well. What might you need money for? Posters, we've talked about. Photography, promoting a gig, maybe a boost on Facebook, for example, apart from your posters. Promoting your album, maybe even hiring a PR company to help you, or an individual to help you. Press ads and online ads. The what and the amount is going to be very different depending on who you are, what point your career is at, what your goals and ambitions are. And you may, if you're further down in your career, you may have a team doing this with you, but equally that's not even always the case. So there are very experienced artists around who choose and like to do the DIY approach. Anyway, back to where might you get this blimmin' money from? And here's a best practice idea for you. Every time you sell something and every time you make a profit, put 10% of that into a separate account. I swear you will never regret doing that, but you might regret not doing that. And sometimes, you know, it might be gig income, it might be merch income. You won't regret it. It sometimes might be a tiny amount. It might seem like such a tiny amount, but it will add up. And sometimes it will be a big amount, and you'll be able to really think, right, this is really building for my next album release. This is really building for promoting my next tour. And if you ring fence it somehow for, this is for marketing me as a musician, then it's really valuable in ways, as I've said, about a way of valuing yourself, as well as having something useful in the pot. Other ways, because especially as, let's face it, there ain't been many gigs lately, other ways of supporting yourself for a marketing campaign or for yourself as an artist could be a crowdfunder. That has a double effect of raising money, but also raising your profile. So make sure before you do that, you start to get your ducks in the row with the way you're going to present yourself in that, with your fantastic photos and your consistent typeface, your colorways, your what am I saying as an artist, who am I, what do I want people to think when they see me, all of that we've mentioned. You might consider getting funding if you haven't already. I know that it's hugely competitive, and it's got all the more so during the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that you might not get it. It doesn't mean that you won't get it. It's you know, I'm living proof that you can get funding from Arts Council and PRS, and it's hard slog, but there's lots and lots of really good help around. even the most brilliant thing I found, which is that when you've written your application, the MU offer a service where you can send your what you think is your completed application to them, and they will send it back after a suitable time of poring over it with, when you think, what the hell is this? Where has my application gone? Not really, they're just brilliantly insightful tips of changes that you might make before you actually make the final application. You feel more confident doing that, and there are so many people around, helpful people around who you can get advice from. Especially so many videos came out during the pandemic about how to fill in an application form that almost too much, but it could never be too much, that kind of help. You might consider setting up a Patreon account, a Patreon profile, and a couple of my artists have had some incredible support from that, incredible. And it's not only a way of getting some money in for your marketing or for whatever you need for your music, but it's also a way of connecting with your true fans. And that is, I think it's been really helpful for some artists to feel that they had some people to speak to during these really, really difficult times, as well as keeping their art alive in a very productive way, really productive, really amazing things have come out of that. You might be lucky enough to even have a patron. I think it's not a given, of course, but there may be, when you're looking to put together your marketing budget, there may be somebody who might support you, maybe as a loan or even as a wonderfully generous gift, because people do like to support artists. They do like to support artists. That's why Patreon was set up, because that's a thing. That's always been a thing. Anyway, those are some ways where you might have of gathering together a marketing budget, but really, really as important as having that budget is giving your marketing a direction, setting goals, making plans, taking time, as we were talking about, to work out who you are, how to communicate. This is how you're going to really make the most of any money that you spend. We talked at the beginning about putting the right product in the right place at the right price at the right time. And so what is your product? Your product, you say, it's obviously the music, right? Of course it's your music. Of course it's your music. It's gigs, it's videos, it's recordings, collaborations. It's also networking, and that I would include that in a part of kind of building your product, or at least a currency of it. Nurture your relationships. They're really, really beautiful currency in this. You can support each other in so many ways. But you are also the product. You are the product. And I think that, when I talk about an artist as a brand, there are plenty of people who will go, marketing speak, I'm not a brand. That's fine. It just is it's a very neat word that you can make mean what you want. And I think that thinking of yourself in that way, even if it's just temporarily while you do the brainstorming on the big piece of paper, is really valuable. It's everything you do, if you package it up in a consistent wrapping paper of authenticity of who you are as an artist and what you're trying to say to the world and what you represent, then it's going to be more powerful. So we looked at brainstorming, or just putting your name or band name in the middle of a piece of paper, and then looking at, who am I? What's my vision? What's my story? What am I trying to say? What's my music all about? There's this sweet game that we used to play at Design Bridge, which is fun, and it's worth. I'm going to share it with you because it's fun, but it's valuable. If you think about yourself as your music artist, or as yourself as your band. Think of yourselves all together, and how you want world to see you. So, and I'm going to ask you, if you or your band were a car, what kind of car would you be? If you were a kind of food, what food would that be? If you were a drink, what would that be? Just think off the top of your head. Try not to think too deeply about this. It is fun, but it's really important that to make it real. Get it. Don't think too deeply about what you want. Yeah, you can get kind of tied up. And if you were an animal, if you or your band were an animal, what animal would you be? It's really fun to do that. It's interesting to see what comes out. And why on earth would you even do that? It's a way in to your brain. It's a way of tricking your brain into telling you what you think your music persona is, what you want your artist to represent. It's fun and you can throw it away, but it could be that if you get it spot on, it becomes a really useful checklist. So when you're going through all the things, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, these are the photos, blah, blah, blah. You could just make this part of your checklist of, am I on the right track here? Check back to your big piece of paper, check back to your, oh yeah, I'm a Persian cat. Am I getting that right? You could do all kinds of other exercises. You could make a mood board, you could do all kinds of stuff, but maybe not for now. Another useful thing to write down is, if somebody asked someone else to describe you and your music, what would you want them to say? What do you want them to say? And sometimes it's quite nice to put it in the third person because you can be, it feels more comfortable. Maybe just and also do a poll, see what people do say. Splurge it all out. I think alongside this, it's so important. It's good to get to grips with what are we wanting to communicate and how are we going to do that. But it's really important to have goals with any marketing campaign. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have goals, you can't know whether you're being successful. And I do a kind of, with my artists, a wish list thing. You know, what are your short-term wish lists? What's your long-term wish list? And with this wish list, I'm saying, don't just make it a boring list. This is a list where if you had a magic wand, in 10 years' time, where would you be? Not where do you think you might be if nothing changes. In 10 years' time, with a magic wand and nothing stopping you, where do you wish that you would be? And write it down. And this can be private, but writing it down will shift something in you. It will be really good if you write down, I want to play in the Albert Hall. Or it might be, I just want to not only play in the local folk club, I want to go to the next town. It doesn't matter what it is, but I would say do a 10-year wish list, because that's really interesting. We don't even know who we're going to be in 10 years, but we could make something possible just by dreaming it up. 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, that's becoming more real. 6 months, still going to be a bit of a crazy 6 months maybe, but let's see what could you do? What might be your short-term and long-term goals? So, you know, on the list you might put where you want to be in the press, where do you want to be gigging, how much are you going to have grown your database, your mailing list, how many more social media followers are you going to have? And if you create these steps, or what size gig, what size venue you're going to be playing to, what size venue do you reckon you're going to be able to fill at those times? And by creating these steps and it's brave to do this, right? Because it's brave to admit sometimes how ambitious you might be. it's also really fine to admit if your ambitions aren't so big, but it's really good to be very, very clear about what you're aiming for. It's a very, very good brain exercise and bravery exercise. And the thing is that anything is possible, and you could make it happen. A lot of the things on Reggie's original wish list from 8 years ago are ticked off, and some of them aren't. But I would say, even if none of them were ticked off, it's still a really valuable list, because if you're looking at your wish list and thinking, oh, I haven't done any of those things, or I've only crossed off one thing, then it's a sign to you that you need to change your strategy. You need to look again at your marketing. You might need to, it might not be about money, but it might be about positioning. It might be about all kinds of things, but at least you're flagged up. And then if you do tick them off, you get a really, really good feeling. So I would say a good idea to set yourself some actual time to do that really, really, really well. Plot out maybe how many albums you might release. It doesn't matter, it's fiction, but you've got a really good starting point. Where you might want your tours to be, maybe that I'm going to tour Australia in that year or whatever. It's a really interesting exercise to let your brain go there. Also, I'm conscious that I've got only 3 minutes left. I'm just going to go, develop, select what is right, what feels right for you when you're budgeting for these, when you're budgeting for this. I think that photography is an area that that's really, really worth either investing in or finding a really good swap with a fantastic photographer for. Spending money on photos is good. It's your image, it represents you. You want it to be consistent for a while and then change with each tour or new run of gigs, new album. Get mileage from digital photography. A good photographer will take lots of photos. You'll pick the chief ones, maybe pay for them to be high res, and then you'll probably have a whole load of others that are low res and usable on your social media, which will have the same flavor, the same brand feel, the same communication, but will be not just the same old pick each time. Keep with the branding. Videos, you can do so much yourself, and some homemade videos can be absolutely brilliant, but be choosy. Maybe with your next album release, it might be time to consider spending money with a brilliant videographer and director. Your typography that comes into everything. With videos, you can get loads of mileage, can't you? If you get a great video done, you can take clips from it, and each little clip of a different bit of the song and the video could become a tiny bit of promotion. That's a good way of stretching you've spent money, get mileage out of it, photos and videos, both. Artwork for your album, I'd say pay someone or do a great swap, or do it yourself if you're brilliant, but make sure that you're the best person to do it. Some DIY artwork for albums is absolutely fantastic, but make sure that you only do that if you're the right person. Social media a lot of it is free, but you can get some good results from targeted ads. And I would say be targeted. £5 can go a long way if you target, and if you check that what's actually going to appear is really appealing. So that again comes back to, what am I communicating? How can I make people want to hear my music? How can I make people want to come to this gig? Rather than, it's so tempting when we are busy. I do it myself. You see it all the time. I'm really excited about this gig. I can't wait to do this gig. There's nothing wrong with that, except that it doesn't grab attention. So think very carefully about the words that you're going to put alongside the image or the video that you're using. Press campaigns is somewhere where you might want to spend money. It's so much legwork, so it's lovely if someone else does it. I mean, I do it for people, so I know how much legwork is involved, but I would say that don't worry if you can't pay somebody. The DIY approach has got an advantage, because you are then talking to the press, to the radio yourself, and you're building relationship which as I said before, is it's often worth more than money. If you're going to pay money for an ad or some kind of featured artist thing in something, then make it count. Encourage them to do a really good interview with you. Generally, I would say if you're going to take out an ad, like a paid ad in a publication, try and get a feature as well. Also, just chatting to the editor about what they might want for a feature is going to be really good. It's all about building relationship. Yeah, I think the final thing I was going to talk about really was about the importance of planning. I mean, really, you need to, if you're planning an album release, you need to have the physical all ready to send off to the best reviewers, the chief reviewers, 3 months ahead of your release date. A lot of digital distributors also, you need to have everything ready 8 weeks before. It will vary, but if you pay for digital distribution, then make sure you're going to get your pre-order links early enough. I think it's sometimes it can be worth spending some money on Submit Hub and Muso Soup. I can do a little handout to go with this if you want the addresses and the whys and wherefores of these names I'm using. But Submit Hub and Muso Soup are places you can send your forthcoming release to and get they're playlisters and bloggers, and can be really, really useful connections. Definitely use a mailing list. Definitely get your website in order. If you need to spend money on that, then that is money well spent. And again, you might be able to do a swap. I think what's really useful with a music website is look at the people who, and with all of the things I've said about, look in the industry of the people who you similar to you but on the next level, and look at them, kind of critique them, not to their face, but look at their strengths and weaknesses. What are they doing really well? Who do they use for their PR? Who do they use for this? How do they do this? What stands out? Where are they gigging? Looking at your kind of, I guess they're friendly competitors in a way, can be incredibly useful resource. And get your website, make it the showcase that you deserve, and as much as possible, you can get mileage out of that. You can stretch what make the money that you've spent on that website, if you did, work for you by not just making a website and then leaving it, but making a website, and if you've got a news page, make sure you consistently add some news. If you've got a gig page, create the live events really well with their own URL, that you can grab, and then use that when you're promoting the gig, wherever you're promoting it, because it will bring everyone back to your website. Before you do that, you want to make sure your website is really brilliant. So that's why, right from the beginning, I've been saying, get all your ducks in a row. If it feels daunting, add that into your plan. When am I going to do this, and when am I going to do that? And I think I'm probably out of time, so Tom's back.
I'll jump back in. Just thank you so far. I mean, I really enjoyed just working through your thought processes there, and the calmness, and also the method, the sort of methodical nature that you've set out there is really fantastic. We've got loads of questions in the Q&A. I don't think we'll get through all of them, so I'm just going to jump in, and a couple of them are related to other things that are fantastic for people to look at. So there are some questions in here about bookings and how far advanced should you route a tour and book a tour. We've got a fantastic talk from Phil Simpson specifically on that, so I would have a look at that. And there's a few bits of questions around website and social media, and there are other talks on Folk Talk Academy specifically about how to maximize your social media and how to maximize the reach of your website. So if it's all right with you, Katie, we'll start at the top and we'll just see how far we get. The first question on here is, how often do you update or change this kind of the spider diagram thing that you're talking about with Reg? How often do you update or change that? Is it set in stone, or do things morph?
I think nothing's set in stone, but I would say set something that is realistic for you, because you might want to look at it. You might think, oh, I'm going to look at this every month, but is that really realistic? I would say 6 months is a good rule of thumb. Every year even is enough, because a year goes really fast, and then you have a lot to reflect on, which is what you need really to when you're assessing. You need to have enough time to see, has my database increased? Have my followers increased? Are more people coming to my gigs, or is it going horribly wrong? So not too long, but not too short. I would say 6 months is a really good rule of thumb, and a year is also okay.
I think it feels to me what you were describing about giving ourselves permission to think about the future and to work out who we are is a big part of this, because we all, I'm sure you do the same, speak to many artists who are so close to gig, record, tour, next thing, that it's very difficult to look up and out. And I think some of the guidance you've given here is perfect for that element. Another question we have here is about something quite practical. How do your plans differ when you're trying to promote a specific thing like a concert or an album release versus just generally trying to grow the identity of an artist?
That's a really good question. And that thing about the identity of an artist, for me, needs to be, it's an ongoing plan. And if you're not careful, it just doesn't happen. So I would say there are tips in terms of the planning for the overall profile, where I would just have some little check-in points. Maybe once a month, check your Facebook banner, maybe change that once a month, but not just change it for the sake of it, change it in line with consolidating who you are. Oh, I was going to say something really brilliant there and it's gone from my mind. It was about, anyway, but with it'll probably come back. But yeah, with your overall, oh yes, it's this. So for example, something that could be really helpful for you if you're looking at, okay, this year I am going to release that album, or I'm going to do this amazing gig, but what about my artist profile all year round? Look at the who I am, what I'm bringing, what I'm interested in thing, and look at a year, look at a calendar. It's wonderful. It's good fun to look at a calendar and then think, are there any times in this year where where it's relevant for me to say something that's useful, going to be interesting for other people, but relevant to my music. So is there a mental health awareness week? Yes. In that week, I'm not going to be doing any gigs. I'm not going to release anything necessarily, but I've got this great song that's really has moved a lot of people about suicide and how to help people. And that's when I'm going to just kind of draw from my back catalogue and focus on that week. So I'm afraid that it's absolutely vital to plan these things. That's my thing about the overall keeping your profile high. It won't just happen if you get up in the morning and go with the flow, or it might be, and that might be enough, but it's more likely to happen if you look at a calendar and plan some stuff in that's not related to your gigs. And people like that because they don't want you to be forever selling to them. They don't want you to always be saying, come to my gig, buy my album. They do want to know those things, but they want to know stuff that affects them in their everyday life. So I'd say a calendar, and I hope that's helpful for the overall thing. Whereas for a gig, it's all kind of, I would make, if that's the gig, what am I going to do the week before? What am I going to do the week before that? What am I going to do a month before that? If it's a big gig, plan that carefully. Plan the press, plan what you're going to say. And when I would say, well, the worst place to sit and think about brilliant thing am I going to say about this gig is sitting at your laptop. Go for a walk, or go and sit by, like I'm lucky, I go and sit on top of the hill on this amazing bench and look at the view and do loads of social media planning there, or gig planning, promotion planning, because you're likely to say something a bit more interesting. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I'm jumping up and down through the question list because there's one here that relates to what you've just said. This person's written, Everything you've spoken about so far involves careful planning and preparation. What approach do you take if you need to be more immediate or reactive? Do you have any top tips for tackling last-minute low sales? Can you turn things around by throwing money at it? What are your thoughts?
Well, what was the beginning of that question? Was it?
Basically, do you have any, what approach do you take if you need to be immediate or reactive?
Well, I always, just that bit in a nutshell. I think if you plan really well, then you can then you can wing it really well. So the planning remains important, and that awful feeling of a gig approaching, and are you going to sell enough tickets? I would say just really keep in mind that is definitely when you don't say, come to this gig, come to this gig. That is when you need to, I think, yes, put a $5 on an event, Facebook event boost, but think about what you're saying. Don't just say, right, I've targeted it, I've spent the $5, why aren't the tickets why aren't they flying out the door? It's about why should that person come to your gig? I'd say put yourself in their shoes. Why should they? Why should they? It's going to be a lovely sunny evening. How can you tempt them inside? It might be about taking a quote from a lyric instead of saying, here's the gig. Just have a different kind of lead in, or something funny. I mean, some people work well with humor and others not so well, but it's about being, again, your authentic self, isn't it? If you were talking to a mate, how would you persuade them to come to that gig without just saying, come to my gig because no one's coming? I think it's about being tempting, being interesting. Go back to your list of why do I do the music that I do? And maybe there's something in there that you can use, but try not to panic, stay steady, and think outside the box. Take a photo of something really weird, but related. Don't show the same photo again and again and again. Get something that's in a theme, maybe,
I think that there's loads there. And we've probably got time for one very quick question left. How about this one? How do you know what option to choose when planning your marketing campaign? So how do you know when to spend money on flyer distribution versus a radio plugger? How do you know what works?
You will usually find out what works for you. You might be lucky enough to have a colleague who will tell you what works for them, and they are similar to you, and they can advise you, and you use the same thing as them. But I would just say you need to use what's right for you. You've got to stick within a budget. Be as creative as you can with it. And also remember that people who you're paying are human, and you might be able to have a really good conversation with a radio plugger and say, I can only afford this. What could you do for that? Is there one thing? Get them to tell you, if there's one thing I should do and I have to pay you for it, what is that? Because I've got to spend the rest on posters. Yeah. Ask people, really, people are human, they like to help.
I think, again, I've mentioned this so many times, but there's such a running theme through all these talks and all these presentations about the ecosystem with which we're all working in, and how the importance of speaking to other people and sharing those networks, those ideas will hopefully lift the entire sector.